Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books. And today I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review of For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten. This is my first Hannah Whitten book, and I know that she is popular on Bookstagram. So when I saw this book on sale at Barnes & Noble, I went, this sounds great. I mean, clearly it's a Red Riding Hood retelling. It is described right on the front as being a brilliant dark fantasy. I'm like, this is gonna be great. I can't wait to dive in. However, this book left me feeling confused. That's the best word that I can use to describe this one, confused. So I'm going to talk about world building, characters, and plot so that you can be just as confused as I am. So here's my 60-second setup of this story. There is this kingdom that lives near a cursed wood, and there is this long tradition of sacrificing daughters to the woods so that they don't get attacked by the woods. That's like a real oversimplification, but it's always the second daughter. The second daughter of every generation gets sacrificed to the woods. There's a wolf that lives in the woods. She gets sacrificed to the wolf and the kingdom stays safe. That is the setup of the story. And our main character, Radaris, aka Red, is the second daughter. So the book opens on her day of sacrifice, the day that she is supposed to go into the woods, be sacrificed to the wolf, and keep her family safe. But of course, this is a whole book. It's not as simple as that. Everything that Red thought she knew turns out to be wrong, and things happen. That's really all you need to know. That is all you need to know. So let's start out with the world building. I've heard this story before, the whole concept of like a haunted wood, like that's been done before. It's been done in a number of different stories. But this book tries to, and I use the word tries to establish this very complex and convoluted mythology. And honestly, I read a lot of fantasy. I am used to like complex world building and complex mythology. By the end of this book, I really still did not understand what the heck was going on. So basically, there is these woods. There are sentinels in the woods that are, normally you think sentinel like protector, but they're bad, and the only way that they can, well, I shouldn't say the only way. In the beginning of the book, Red has some sort of healing magic she uses on them, but then also they need blood to stop them from attacking. There's these 5 sleeping kings. They have something to do with how this curse came about. Long story short here, this book has way too many questions and not enough answers. Like the whole concept of sacrificing a second daughter to this wolf person, the book never explains why that's even a thing. Like, why is that a thing? The book never explains it. It never does. And honestly, the whole concept of the wolf to begin with in this book just really didn't make sense to me. And honestly, even though this book is described or appears to be a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, the only thing that this story has in relation to Little Red Riding Hood is A, the character's name, Radaris, aka Red, and 2, that there is a wolf. Everything else is actually more of a Beauty and the Beast type story. It's a Beauty and the Beast story where she gets captured by the wolf, the beast, even though she does go to him willingly. And like the whole thing with the enchantment and the enchantment of the wood, like this is much more a Beauty and the Beast story. If you want to say it's a cross between the two, okay, I'll find that acceptable. So at the end of the day, the world building, it got to a point where I just decided I didn't care anymore, and I just kind of let it wash over me. I just went with it because it did not make any sense to me. I have way more questions at the end of the book. The only thing, again, I will say here, I guess I guess this book is dark fantasy because the characters use their blood for a lot of different things. So I will say, trigger warning, if you are affected by blood or people, cutting themselves to use their blood for things, just be aware of that going in. Again, I personally didn't find that dark for someone to, prick their finger and drip a little blood on the floor to save someone's life. But, if you do, that's fine too. So now let's talk about the characters, starting with our main character, Red. Unfortunately, Red is the least interesting character in this entire story. She's the main character. She's the character that we spend the most time with. Unfortunately, she is the least interesting. If you have read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, Red's character very much reminds me of Alina Starkov. Alina Starkov in the book is pretty much a blank slate. There is no substance to her. There is no substance to Red. Red never does anything. We don't really learn anything about her other than she has to go into the woods and be with the wolf. That's pretty much it. And she's always reacting to things. She never makes any decisions. It's just things happen to her and she reacts to them. It's very boring to read. It's not great to read. And honestly, a little bit disappointing. And then there's the wolf. Again, the wolf is kind of a boring character. Towards the end of the book, there is something vaguely interesting that happens to him. But still, Red and the wolf, they're the two most boring characters ever. So when it gets to the romance between them, because it's a YA fantasy, there has to be a romance. Again, it is the most boring romance you have ever seen. There's nothing that you haven't seen a million times before. And honestly, the way that they talk to each other, the way that Red describes the wolf sometimes, how he makes her feel is kind of cringe and eye-rolling. Now, to be fair, I will say that to me, there is one character in this book who was interesting, and that is Red's older sister. So like I mentioned at the beginning, Red is the second daughter. Second daughter gets sacrificed. Her older sister, the sister left behind, is named Nevera, Neve. Neve gets left behind, and Neve is thinking that she lost her sister to this terrible wolf. Her sister did this terrible thing. So Neve, we get glimpses of her story throughout the book. We don't spend a ton of time with her, but we get enough of Neve to know that she kind of becomes consumed with this need to save Red, but at the same time, she starts to get involved in things that are not good, we'll say, not good, and she kind of has this slow descent into madness, basically. And honestly, that makes her way more of an interesting character than anyone else in this book. There is a sequel to this. I haven't looked into it yet. If the sequel focuses more on Neve than Red, I would consider reading that because she is obviously the most interesting character in the story, and I kind of think it should have been about her in the first place because that would have been way more interesting. So now let me talk about the plot. So world building, not great. Characters, also not great, except for Eve. The plot, I'm sad to say, is also not great. It's also not great. Because the plot basically tries to explain all this mythology, which doesn't make any sense. And even the chapters with Neve, even her stuff doesn't really make any sense. I still don't understand at the end of the day, what is really going on with this forest. I don't understand. It's so convoluted and makes no sense. And I just, again, by the back half of the book, I was just kind of reading it, but not even digesting it because I just wanted to get to the end at that point. And then again, there is the romance aspect, which I've already talked about, so I'm not going to talk about it again. There's there's nothing else in here. There is nothing else in the plot besides the things that I have already mentioned, which unfortunately makes it not my favorite book that I've read this year. And it's not that any of these things are like egregiously wrong. They're just, I've just read such better stuff at this point that this just doesn't measure up. I didn't mean for this to turn into a rant, but I kind of feel like it has. That's okay. Just to wrap this up, again, world building, convoluted and confusing, characters, dull and boring, and plot, not that exciting. So unfortunately, I didn't quite care for this one, even though I said I would potentially be interested in the sequel if it focuses just on the interesting characters. If not, I'm gonna have to let this one go. That's all for me today. So now I want to know from you, have you read For the Wolf? Did you like it more than me? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section below. And even if you haven't read it, let me know your least favorite book of the year so far. This might be at the top of my list. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading.